Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Blacklist, Season 10, Episode 15. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I think the opening to this episode might be indicative of Reddington's current condition, especially with what the rest of the episode ends up being about. But he's walking out in the middle of the street, picking up a coin and being like, oh, it's heads, so that's kind of a good omen. It's kind of like, oh, it's going to be like a lucky day or something. But it's like the fact is he was just standing there makes me go like, the fact is you didn't move, it seemed like you might have taken a step back, but it almost feels like you were ready for it to hit you. That's why I feel like Reddington's ready for things to end. He already, once I brought this up previously, he already has been ever since he wanted Liz to take over. So he was already sick, and that's why I'm wondering, is his condition getting worse? Because even at the end, jumping ahead a little bit, Denbei's like, what's going on, Red? Are you okay? And he's like, is everything okay? And it's like, yeah, but he's speaking like so, dancing around it, being like, yeah, but that's all relative, you know, but are you doing okay? It's like, yeah, but okay is relative, but it's like, I'm doing fine, which obviously even fine is relative, and it's like, it's that one of those things where someone is not okay, but they're saying they're okay, but they don't really mean it, but they're saying it just so you don't worry. That's what's going on there. But breaking down the episode, obviously Cooper's like, yo, this Arthur Hudson thing, we need a case. He's looking into us. It's like, okay, so, also I love that he was like, yeah, I'm gonna miss having Sia around. She was kind of a great traveling companion. It's like, Cooper's like, I sent her to watch you, not like make friendship bracelets with you. But he was like, yeah, because I was going to recommend her to this doctor who's actually really hard to get in touch with because she snores. And he's like, yeah, but the guy owes me a favor. But it's like, okay, so now Harold, you're going to be our in-between to tell Sia about this doctor I'm talking about. Because that's what Reddington does. He deflects, and projects and deflects with, like, humor. It's kind of a defense mechanism, but I guess it's just like the nature of the beast of being the criminal that you are. But Red ends up giving the Task Force 3 case, which I love that, like, they're like, oh, blacklisters. And if you notice this episode, there aren't numbers. They could have easily been like, oh, here's 1 number, here's 2 number, here's 3 number. And even the episode being called the hat trick. The hat trick meaning you got 1, 2, 3. Typically, well, I mean, I don't know if it's 100% associated with being in threes. Maybe it is. It's like at least I see it as that of being, isn't it the same thing as hitting a trifecta? I think hat trick is kind of the same thing as hitting like a trifecta of like you got all 3 right, but I don't know if it's always bound to 3. I guess you could make the argument it's kind of 3 out of 4 because, Red didn't like nail his side of things, but the task force did. Red gave them 3 cases to work. One was an angel of death situation. One was a crooked lawyer, and then one was like an IVF situation. And so the team investigates all of them. Let's kind of work them down one by one. Let's start off with the angel of death situation. It's like an angel of mercy. It's like, okay, these patients died, but it's like, yeah, something does seem weird, but they died of like heart failure, which is obviously the biggest contributor. And I love that Herbie was like, yeah, like, maybe a mother-in-law that kind of stays with you. And he's like, oh, is that just me? And everyone's going to look at him. Herbie's like, all right, let me focus on work. Once again, I love that he has that same like, kind of almost like frantic but kind of nervous energy that Aram does. Like when he gets nervous, he starts speaking a lot. Just Herbie's a talker. But the fact is that he ended up picking up, and I love that he kind of shit on pathologists to some extent. He's like, oh yeah, like the people, not the specific ones, that he's like, oh no, it's not having friends in high places, it's having friends in creepy low places, like, so you don't have to meet the pathologist people who interact with, like, who, you don't have like creepy dead bodies, like, hanging around, so like the creepy people that exist in the basements and stuff like that, you have friends with them and connections with them. But it turns out all of these patients were overdosed on potassium because it's like, yeah, your body needs a good enough amount, but too much of it can kill you and it like get your heart pumping like crazy and you die from it. So now it's like, okay, so someone's intentionally going around and injecting these patients, and it's an angel of death. And so they thought they had it at first, but even I should have figured there'd be a wrinkle to it because Herbie was like, yeah, we can tie her to 2 of these 3 deaths, 2 or 3 of these deaths because she was the nurse attending them. But the problem is they can't tie her to the 3rd one because the 3rd one died before she even got to work that day. So what? Maybe she like once again, it's contributing factors. Like, well, maybe she gave them enough the previous day, but it depends on weight, age, and all that. But then looking to it further, they thought it was a nurse named Dawn. It's not her. Obviously, they did a good job in the episode, the way they structured it to be like, oh, she seems suspicious. But I'm like, but that's the thing. They literally kept saying the entire episodes, like, these seem a little too easy. They're not of the usual caliber of what we deal with. So it turns out, with the Angel of Death situation, that it wasn't actually Dawn. She wasn't killing her patients. It turns out this is a manufacturing error, that the saline bags or whatever were filled with too much potassium. So like a lot of these bags were like, instead of having the specific dosage they were supposed to have, they had way more. It's not all of them, but I think they said in a grand total, it's like less than 1%. But that's still, in the amount that they're putting out, it's like still like over like 100,000 bags. So we had these particular victims, but there could be way more out there because all those bags went to different hospitals. It's like it just happened to be like these patients happened to unfortunately get these bags that were ticking time bombs sitting on the shelves the entire time. So they go and meet with like the CEO, and it seems like he is guilty, but it's because the guy ends up revealing, because one of the guys, like, he's like, hey, I'm the head of production or whatever. I'm the dude that's like, I want an immunity deal to bring this whole thing down. The CEO knew about the issue, because it was like, yeah, there was like a week that they ended up shutting down. So it's like, it seems like you knew about the issue, and it's like, they did. They're like, all right, let's kind of reboot everything here, and we won't say anything, because it would be too, once again, it's that cost-effective thing of like, hey, it would cost us too much, and like both monetarily and, well, even monetary on both fronts, but like we'd have to pay out a certain amount to recall those bags, but it also costs a lot to kind of, to our reputation as a business would take a hit because of that. So it's better just like, it's less than 1%. Once again, that's still like 100,000 bags or something like that. But it would cost it was just a cost analysis was kind of had. So the CEO goes down for that because he was aware. They would told him like a month ago about this issue, and he just didn't want to say anything. So that's why innocent people die. So there's that. Then there's the crooked lawyer situation. She actually got some settlements for some people, and you're like, okay, but it's like, oh, they have nothing but, like, one of her clients had nothing but good things to say about her. But then it turns out she was actually pocketing some of the money. Whereas like one guy, he got $1 million from his settlement, but it turns out he actually got $3 million, but she put a fake deal in front of him and made him sign the one with $1 million. She pocketed the other $2 million. And it's like, oh, like what kind of because they're used to dealing with blacklisters. All right, who are you sending this money to? And she's like, nobody. I basically took the money and used it myself. I'm not have some like nefarious thing. I'm like, I'm paying for our like a new home, sending my kids to the best of schools, because that gets expensive over and over again with every new grade, with every new graduation. It gets more and more expensive. So she wasn't doing it for like, I mean, it still sucks because you were robbing your clients. But at the same time, it wasn't as nefarious of like, ooh, I'm sending this money to some like terrible human being who's using this money to fund something. It's like, no, I was funding my own lifestyle, which is crappy in your own regard, but it's not as crappy as like, oh, like we thought you were dealing with like a severely like terrible human being. You weren't. Then the IVF situation, a whole bunch of embryos were lost because it seemed like maybe a hacker was involved. And all these embryos ended up being lost because the power to kind of keep them at the temperatures that they're supposed to be, to keep them in the storage they're in, went down. But even the backup generators. And so ultimately, Sia and said like, yeah, the tech team found out someone used a backdoor access, because like a normal hacker to be able to like do what they did would have had to be like have on the same level of like, you know, stuff as like the FBI to be, because even they nearly missed like this backdoor access. So someone on the inside had to help be a part of this. Well, the company that kind of took over security for this IVF company, it turns out that one of the main people we met earlier in the episode, he is the son of the CEO of this thing, and he tried to ruin things between his dad and his stepmom because they were trying to have children, and his dad had like, was it testicular cancer, and the embryo, like this, you know, obviously all that was set up beforehand, so those embryos, that situation can't be replaced. Like, he can't have any more children now. And so because that son, he's like, yeah, my dad built this, but I'm the one that brought it into the 21st century, kept us relevant. Because of that, being the selfish prick that he was, he not only jeopardized like any future siblings he had, because he was about to say like, yo, I'm not about to split what I worked so hard all my adult life for some kid to like come about. Because even he's like, yeah, that woman is young enough to be my own daughter. It's disgusting. And it's like, because the problem is, I mean, it sucks what he did. That was shitty regardless, but it's not even just like you did that to your family. There's so many people, because they even said like, weren't those like 30 grand like per like extractment or whatever. So there's so many people who probably put their life savings up to do this, to have families, because this was like probably like a last ditch effort, and you took that away from them because you were a selfish prick. And especially because now with everything that Sia's learned about her mom, that kind of comes into play in this episode, especially in that portion where she's like, my mom would have done anything for me, and the fact of the matter is that you would do something so terrible. It's not like, oh my god, like your father didn't love you or nothing. It's like you worked for your father, but you were a selfish prick that wanted more, and you jeopardized not only what your mom, what your stepmom and your dad have, but you also jeopardize so many other people's futures. Like, if my mom was here, she would have left you bloody and broken. And it's like, and he would have deserved it. It's like, you are the biggest piece of crap. And the fact is that you didn't seem that, you weren't heartbroken about it. You're like, oh, well, I got caught. But it's like, it's not till Sia said what she said that it kind of cut him deep. It's like, God, you suck. It's just kind of almost like the Gemma thing. Like when Dembe leaned into her last episode, it's kind of like that in this regard. But it's like, okay, we took down all these people, but it's like, yeah, but is this really like what Red's sending us? It was like, yeah, these were bad people that need to be stopped, but they're not the caliber of criminal we're usually dealing with. But then it turns out they're all connected to this, what was it, the Wildlife Party or something like that? It's basically a group that's all about the conservation of like wildlife species. And it turns out one of the major investors was Red. Red was using one of his aliases because he wanted to vet this place because he knew something was up because he does his own homework. So it's like, hey, it's two birds, one stone. I give the task force people to go after, but I also make sure this company I'm about to dump a lot of my fortune into is above board, so there aren't like, got rid of all the slimy people involved in it, which are the three people that got taken down. The CEO of the Sailing VIDS company or whatever, the kid that with the IVF situation and the crooked lawyer were on that same board. So you're like, the moment there was like a redacted name on the list, it's like, oh, they want to keep, I was like, it's Red. It's definitely got to be Red. So it's like, that's what this was all about. And we know that conversation came up earlier because there was like was it a senator or it was somebody that he was talking to like an episode or so ago who was all about, about, once again, the conversation about the gray wolves of like, oh yeah, like their population is going up like 3% in just the past couple months. So we know like Red's about that cause and about that. So maybe that's actually what sparked this. I mean, it seems like he's already been a contributor, but he's a major contributor now, maybe because of all of that. And so ultimately it's like, well, we took down these bad people who need to be taken down. But also it's like, wait, so we're back to doing dirty work for Red? It's like, yeah, but it's actually for a really good cause. So it's not like anything nefarious. So kind of tying this all back in. Well, I'll go ahead and finish the rest of the episode because I thought was interesting. Red broke into Arthur's place himself. I'm like, well, to be fair, he doesn't have a right-hand person to do that for him. But I feel like you could easily get someone else to do that for you. But he's decided to do it himself, which he's done stuff himself, but it's like, well, he doesn't have a Wicha nor a Dembe to kind of do that for him, or at least go with him. He went by himself because it's like, this is a congressman, I don't have to worry about it. So he found out the congressman hired a private investigator to follow this girl. It was an Abby Ryder, and it turns out her connection to Arthur is he's the guy that prosecuted her mom and dad and sent them to prison. She was in the foster care system, but he's not like a terrible. I wondered I was thinking, my immediate thought was, is this like an illegitimate child thing? Or like, does she not know that you're her? No, it's like, no, you felt responsible for her because like, he was sending her parents away. I don't think we found out what her parents actually did. Maybe she talked about it. I don't think she did. But her mom went away for like 11 years, her dad for like 20, and she was a part of the foster care system. And so obviously it's that thing of once you're 18, you get kicked out. Like, you don't have that support system anymore. So life's been pretty rough. She's kind of hung with the wrong crowd, but he's always made sure to keep an eye on her, make sure she's got some of the stuff she needs. But also because she was 18 and left the system, he had a hard time tracking her. That's why the private investigator. So I guess like the private investigator must have she must have been in contact with Arthur at some point in time, because he must have told her about the private investigator, because she already kind of knew about it when he was like, oh, that's what the private investigator was about. So regardless of it all, he has tried to treat her right and try to help out in whatever capacity, which made Red kind of go like, because he thought this would be his end of like, oh, maybe some nuts shouldn't be cracked. He's like, yeah, despite like using the metaphor of like a peanut, like a bowl full of nuts, it's like, yeah, the Brazilian nut's the one that's always forgotten and left uncracked. And this has to be a Brazilian nut situation, because it's like, right, regardless of my reasons of like, right, no life is more important than another type of situation of like, Arthur's doing good work. Like, I looked into this, thought I had like a aha, because even he was like, I am pleasantly surprised. It's not what I expected to hear. He thought he'd find some dirt, but it's like, people do surprise you. He seems like legitimately a stand-up guy. And Red's like, right, if he ends up taking me down, then who am I to jeopardize the good he puts out in the world, especially when he's helping out someone, going above and beyond for someone he feels like he directly impacted by sending her parents to jail. He wanted to make sure she was taken care of, got what she needed. So seems all like the more we spend time, it seems like Arthur's legitimately a good dude. So Red's like, yeah, whatever comes. And Dembe's like, are you really sure about this? Like, the fact is, you're giving stuff away. You had that auction not too long ago. You're giving like half your fortune to this wildlife thing. But Red says specifically, he's like, every hour that passes, we are losing a species. I'm like, is the statistic that why? I mean, like, when you think about things that are, once again, on the endangered species list, as well as stuff that has full-blown either on the borderline of extinction, things that are straight up extinct, it's like, there are contributing factors. Humans have played a major role in a lot of species being extinct. Other things were just, there were other contributing factors in the case of some species, but humans have played a big role in a lot of species being in the situations that they're in. Whether it is a situation of our direct involvement or whether it's an indirect involvement because of the way we've treated the environment and how that's ended up affecting the habitats of said species. So for Red, it all goes back to Agnes. She's already lost so much. I want to make there to be and even he's like, even as powerful as I am, with all the control that I have, even I can't sway this world to 100% be a better place for Agnes, but I can contribute in some shape or form, like this wildlife party thing. He's like, it could end up the money he's given to them could like help them in the future kind of do what they're trying to do. So in his own ways, he's doing every little bit that he can, because it's like, even with my power, my connection, my resources, I can't make this world a great place for Agnes. So it's like, right, she's already lost so much. So what is the world going to look like when she's grown? So I want to make it a better place. So I am going to, like, hopefully by giving some of my stuff away, I'll be able to make the world like a little bit better at a time. And maybe those little things here and there can eventually turn into a massive wave of change. So, but even Dimme's like, yeah, you've given away, you've been generous and given away your money before, but never like this. But Red also uses the parallel of the 3 people they took down this episode. Those people did terrible things just for one more dollar. For him, it's like, yeah, it means nothing in the end. Like, being so, like, not trying to say like, oh, money doesn't matter, but we're talking about people who like go above and beyond just for a little bit more cash will like ruin people's lives. And we see that. I mean, the lawyer not as bad. It's still shitty. She's robbing her clients who are in pain. You're supposed to do right by your clients and you're robbing them blind. The other 2 are like garbage people. The IVF situation and the saline bag situation. But at least with like the lawyer, she's not as bad, but she's still bad for doing what she's doing. It's just not nearly as heinous. But it's like, yeah, these are people for their own selfish reasons scrapping by for that $1 extra, even though they are going to get even though they are in well-off situations, it's kind of the point. We're not talking about people who are at the bottom scraping by where money does matter. It's not a thing of like, Red isn't saying this, and nor am I saying like, oh, money doesn't matter. But it's like when you are super wealthy, money doesn't matter. So it's like, right, give a little back. Once again, that's a interesting thing to hear from a criminal. I've said it time and time again, especially this season, of like, even Red has his own moral code and what he supports and what he doesn't support, So. And I think that also plays into the, was that last episode or the episode before last? It might have been episode 13, the whole convenience store situation where he paid all those people off to make their lives better. Once again, he is like, hey, that helped him in the long run, but also, once again, it's back to that whole thing of, hey, let's put a little good out there in the world. So, I mean, he hasn't fully gone, like, entrepreneur, like, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Philanthropic is the word I've been looking for. I've been struggling to find that word lately, but philanthropic. I mean, philanthropist, but obviously philanthropic in this capacity. But he hasn't always been that way, because obviously the guy this episode, he's like, well, I was thinking about like, oh, like I looked into you, like talking to that detective, be like, I looked into your family circumstances. I could have like given you like this or that to help out, but you know what? I can just straight up threaten to shoot you in the foot. And so he ended up getting the information from that detective. But going back to the point I was making, Dembe is asking like, is everything okay? And it's like, I don't think Red is okay. And I think that also plays into when Aram saw him at the beginning of the season, him looking kind of like facial hair, kind of looking a little rough, and then he just cleaned himself up later after Aram got in touch with Harold. That makes me go like, yeah, it seems like something's at play there, but we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all this ends up taking us. Obviously, there was another episode that came out, so I'm going to immediately jump on that after I kind of finish editing this down and everything. So I'm excited to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good